Well, ladies and gentlemen, we do seemingly have another city that has entered the fray when it comes to potential NHL expansion. Obviously, we're going to be getting some form of expansion we would expect, with the stipulation of the Arizona Coyotes possibly buying land in 20 days and getting their team back. Right now, it's just inactive. And if that happens, the NHL would have an odd number of teams and they will be getting another team. Even if Arizona does not get the land and they don't get a team, the NHL is still very likely expanding by two teams. Now, what cities are potentially involved? We know Atlanta, they have come out with a pitch, as well as Houston, maybe Kansas City, maybe Quebec City, maybe Hamilton. How about New Orleans? NHL expansion team coming in the next 5 years in New Orleans. It was hinted by the governor, Jeff Landry. And you can see the article in relation. Businessman seeks to bring NHL team to New Orleans. Could New Orleans get an NHL franchise? It will if one local businessman gets his way. In fact, he says hockey in New Orleans makes sense. Quote, there's a fan base here. According to Nicholas Perkin, they have two minor league teams based out of Louisiana. And I mean, my initial thought is that hockey really doesn't seem like a good fit in Louisiana. I would much rather have New Orleans get a potential MLB expansion team. I think that would be really cool, especially an open air stadium, considering the Saints have always played in the Superdome. There's no elements in terms of that. Quote, the conversation with the governor's office have been great, as well as the lieutenant governor's office. We're talking about what we can do in terms of making it optimal for investors to invest into an expansion team like this. They've also had conversations with potential investors who are also interested in bringing pro hockey to New Orleans. We've got an incoming call of about $100 million, So they're talking about possibly already raising around $100 million for a potential NHL expansion team. And another question would be, of course, where would they play? I have talked about the New Orleans Pelicans situation several times when it comes to the Smoothie King Center. If you guys don't know, Smoothie King Center is right next to Caesars Superdome, and it is a total concrete shell. And they've been talking about maybe doing a big renovation. Adam Silver has said, look, you need to upgrade this. And it's been reported they've looked into the viability of either upgrading the arena or getting a new one straight up. I do think if they got an NHL team, they would get a new arena that would push them to, because they would be hosting likely two teams in one arena. And I know I said the same thing about Utah with the Delta Center, but let's be honest, that was kind of a unique situation. They are doing a massive renovation to the Delta Center anyways. I don't know how much that's going to cost. I know there's also a report on potential names for Utah. I do think it's going to be the Utah Yeti, but that's neither here nor there. Let's get back to New Orleans possibly getting a team. So I do think with the state of Smoothie King Center, with the NBA potentially in the coming years putting pressure on the Pelicans brass to possibly upgrade their arena, they could potentially come together with the expansion group, all of the investors that potentially buy in to get this New Orleans NHL team, and combine their money to build an arena and share the arena, the Pelicans and whatever the NHL team would be. But again, you're looking at other cities as well that have already made their pitch and really made their name in terms of potentially getting an expansion NHL team. And this is also a situation to where they might only be competing for one spot. It just depends on if the Arizona Coyotes are able to build that arena, get that land. If that happens, it's going to be very hard for New Orleans or really any city, because there's probably going to be at least 5 or 6 viable options depending on the money, the ownership groups. There are a lot of dynamics when it comes to that. Right now, they're saying they've got $100 million at least raised for a potential New Orleans expansion team. But I would expect that New Orleans would probably be pretty down on the list. Although who really knows, if they get the money, they could create dialogue and possibly be one of the top options, because everyone says, well, Houston could get an NHL team. Is Houston really? I mean, I guess because of population, that's why. But still, like, Houston is not, I don't think of Houston and be like, oh yeah, they need an NHL team. And even like Kansas City, I mean, definitely cities in Canada, although I have seen a few videos where now the narrative in Canada is that hockey has already peaked and they've actually got too many NHL teams in Canada. at this point. Like Winnipeg, you look at them, the situation that they're dealing with. So maybe they won't go to Canada. I've said Quebec City based on them building a new arena recently, based on how popular the NHL is in that country. But they do already have a lot of NHL teams there. The NHL might want to stay in the States when it comes to expansion. And there's also been some other, crazy cities like Cincinnati. They've been brought up. I know they're talking about building a new, just like community arena that would seat around 17 or 18K. It doesn't look that great, but that could potentially be an option. I know Omaha, Nebraska was another one. That's very unlikely. I think New Orleans has a better chance than those cities. But still, New Orleans, this is just kind of random. I do like seeing it. Anytime you get new news on relocation, it's kind of cool. But I would like to see New Orleans ideally get an expansion MLB team with an open air stadium. That would be best case scenario, but I don't think that's going to happen. There's really been no reports on New Orleans possibly getting an MLB team. This is just the first I've heard of them with maybe an NHL team, and I do think they would be, at this point, building a new arena or worst case scenario, getting a major, I'm talking like $600 or $700 million renovation to Smoothie King Center to really upgrade it if they do end up getting an NHL team. And this is also based on, what do the Pelicans want to do? Do they want a new arena? Would they be interested in possibly putting together some money with the investors of this New Orleans team, putting their money together, maybe building a $1.2, $1.3 billion brand new arena? I think that's what would be in order, because there's just not a lot of renovation. This is like Bank of America Stadium. They try and renovate these places that are just decrepit, and it's like it's a literal lipstick on a pig. There's no point in doing it. Just build a new arena. And so that's what I think New Orleans would do if they got a team. But this is obviously very preliminary. There was just an erroneous tweet, and I kind of wanted to see if it was true. And it turns out there were some actual articles about New Orleans and a businessman trying to create dialogue, trying to get some investors to get an NHL team to that city. So I would just say to keep New Orleans on your radar when it comes to potential NHL expansion. But in terms of actual NHL expansion, the stuff that's going on, in 20 days, there will be the land auction. It does seem like it's setting up that Arizona will be getting their team back. I guess it's just like the way their Twitter or X account was tweeting. It seemed like they were saying, well, we're revving everyone up like at the end of the year, like counting down to the auction date. So I think they're probably going to win the land auction, although who knows. And if they do get a team, then there'll just likely be one spot remaining for NHL expansion. And I highly doubt that expansion team would be in Canada. I also don't think it would be New Orleans. It would probably go to the highest bidder in the United States, with a city that has a larger population center. So Houston, maybe Atlanta. How about San Antonio? San Antonio is getting a new NBA arena. I wonder if they'd be interested in a potential NHL expansion team. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.